I'm Bob Miller. I'm chair of the Marine Conservation League's Climate Action Working Group and a member of MCL's board. And as I've said in the past, Marine Conservation League's mission is to preserve, protect, and enhance the natural assets of Marin in a changing environment. MCL COG's purpose, Climate Action Working Group's purpose, is to advocate for faster greenhouse gas emissions reduction and carbon removal to slow climate change that damages natural assets in Marin and everywhere else, and is the single biggest threat to human health. COG develops and advocates for positions on innovative emerging technologies and policies that do three things: accelerate electrification, decarbonize the grid, and remove carbon from the atmosphere. And two other Marine Conservation League committees, Parks and Open Space, Land Use, Transportation, and Water, address a wider range of environmental issues, including adaptation to climate change. And I always make the pitch for support to continue to do our advocacy work. You can, if you're not yet a member, you can join at marineconservationleague.org/donate. Now, today we'll hear from Bruce Mast on inclusive utility investment, and followed by reports from organizations. So we may be ending a bit earlier than we normally do. Know that at least 5 people who would normally be here are attending a workshop happening right now on the countywide building electrification plan. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat on MCL's letter to the county on what it would like to see in that plan. So a couple of things. Please keep yourself on mute. Put your questions in chat. Know that we're recording this meeting and it'll likely be made available on the Marine Conservation League's YouTube channel. And if you're interested in developing and advocating for innovative positions that accelerate greenhouse gas emissions reduction, contact me. And you can join others that are doing just that. I'm at robertmiller454@gmail.com. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Will Carroll, who will introduce Bruce Mast.
Okay, thanks, Bob. As Bob indicated, our subject today is tariff on bill financing, also known as inclusive utility investment, or IUI. Advocates have been excited about this idea for some time, and it's gained some traction in scattered pockets throughout the country. With a decision by the California Public Utility Commission last August, California appears to be on the brink of a major breakthrough in making IUI a reality for utility customers throughout the state. In brief, IUI allows utility customers to acquire heat pumps and other energy and efficiency upgrades without paying upfront costs, which can be substantial. With IUI, those upfront costs are initially borne by the utility, which then recovers them over time by adding a tariff charge to the customer's monthly utility bill. The monthly tariff charge is used to reimburse the utility for the cost of the upgrade. Now, due to the efficiency-related cost savings, the customer's monthly energy costs often go down once the upgrade is installed. By design, the monthly tariff charge would not exceed the savings which result from the upgrade. So customers do not pay any large upfront costs, nor do they see any increase in their utility bills in order to pay for the upgrade. As our speaker will describe, there are numerous advantages to an IUI program, particularly for lower income customers and tenants. Tenants are reluctant to make the upfront investment because they might not stay in the property long enough to get the full benefit. With IUI, the tariff follows the meter, not the customer. Customers then pay for the upgrade only while they occupy the premises. Another benefit is that because a tariff is not a loan, customers would not be disqualified because of a poor credit history, or would not have to undergo the kind of credit checks associated with consumer loans. Now, of course, there are many potential wrinkles to this picture, and we are very fortunate to have with us today Bruce Mast, who is probably as qualified as anyone to explain IUI and describe the IUI program that is emerging before the CPUC. Bruce is a nationally recognized thought leader who has devoted his 27-year professional career to advancing building energy efficiency and green building practices. He's a principal of Ardena Energy, a firm that helps to bring energy efficiency, electrification, and storage technologies to market. Bruce has devoted a substantial portion of his professional time and reputation in recent years towards research and advocacy for inclusive utility investment solutions in California. He's led the team at Tech Clean California that put forward an IUI proposal to the CPUC as part of the CPUC's pending Clean Energy Finance Options proceeding. Bruce will tell us about the status of that proposal and the role it's playing in a joint working group of investor-owned utilities and Silicon Valley Clean Energy. This working group has been tasked by the CPUC to develop a joint IUI proposal that could serve as a basis for widespread implementation throughout the state. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bruce.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I barely recognize myself in that. And thank you all for being here today, and thank you for your advocacy efforts around climate change. This is obviously a very critical issue for all of us, and I appreciate your efforts, and hopefully my remarks today can give you new ideas about how to advance the cause. Let's see if I can share my screen. Let's try that. Does that show you a PowerPoint presentation?
Looks great.
Wonderful. So I'm going to talk to you about kind of the state of play here around inclusive utility investments, or tariffed on bill investments. Those two terms are pretty interchangeable. I've been involved with this issue actually for a number of years now, going back to it was like 2019 or 20, when the Building Decarbonization Coalition asked me to co-author a white paper on this topic, along with my colleagues, Dr. Holmes Hummel and Gene Clinton. We wrote a white paper for BDC that basically laid out a roadmap for the Public Utility Commission for adopting what we called at that time tariff on bill investments. And that led then to an opportunity to actually do some program design with Tech Clean California. So I want to talk about kind of where we're at. I'll start with digging a little bit more into just how it works, and Will gave a pretty good overview there already. And then I'll touch on the state of play in California. And then because kind of the path forward does this proposal that we've written with our partner Silicon Valley Clean Energy plays kind of a central role in the path forward. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's in that, and kind of digging even further into the weeds. There's lots of interest in the customer protections that need to be baked into this. So I'll talk a little bit about our thoughts for addressing that as well. At each point along the way, I'll pause for questions. I believe that everyone can enter questions in the chat, and I'll stop at each break point and just check to see if there are questions about what I've covered so far. So let's kind of dig into this a little bit more and just kind of level set here about kind of what this mechanism and how it works. So, home upgrades, for energy efficiency and decarbonization are pretty expensive investments. And if you don't have a lot of cash sitting around, you have to go and borrow some money. And low and moderate income customers often run into challenges if they want to go and take advantage of kind of traditional consumer debt products, because they tend to get disqualified by customers that you see, by these questions that you see on the screen. This is a substantial barrier to California's goals of decarbonizing all of our homes and getting to zero carbon by 2045. And, in the shorter term, Governor Newsom has set a goal of 6 million heat pumps by 2030. And that's a big challenge if we can't serve our low and moderate income customers. Right now, kind of the default solution is a fully publicly subsidized direct install approach where, you know, public funds pay for the entire upgrade. But if you look at the available funds and compare that to the need, we're short on available funds by a factor of like more than 10. So there's this urgent need to find a mechanism that can bring other capital, third-party capital, private capital into these projects and accelerate these investments. And so that's what we're looking at when we talk about inclusive utility investments, as a way to bring more capital into these deals. The way it works, it's developed. It was first developed by a couple of gentlemen in Vermont, the Energy Efficiency Institute, and the idea is, I think it's kind of brilliant. It's modeled on how utilities today make investments in the grid, or if it's a gas company in the pipelines. And when they need to make these big capital investments, they go out and they finance them over years or sometimes decades. And they can make these big capital improvements, and then they recover those investments through rates. And we as ratepayers, whenever we pay our monthly bill, we are paying for the benefits that we receive from those investments. And our bill payments then go to basically repay the capital providers who funded those investments in the beginning. And so now we just basically want to do the same thing on the customer side of the meter rather than the utility side of the meter. And so we would like the utility to be able to make an investment at a particular location, and with the customer's permission, assign a tariff to that location that authorizes the utility to add a line item charge to the monthly bill for cost recovery. And this charge can stay on the bill for an extended period of time, 10, 15 years, and recover the cost. So it's a site-specific investment with site-specific cost recovery, and it's the utility making the investment, not the customer. So we're no longer kind of constrained by the customer's creditworthiness and their financial needs. And so that's a big liberating factor, and that's kind of the superpower of this investment approach. There's a lot of different versions of this program around the country, and different nuances and confusion around nomenclature. So we point to US EPA with their Energy Star program. They have a website where they outline kind of what are the best practices around inclusive utility investments. And we point to that as kind of what we're talking about when we use this term. And we being here, the tech team and our partners at Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Just to maybe draw some further distinctions, this term also tends to get confused a lot with on-bill financing, and that's one reason why we've moved away from the tariffed on-bill term, because it's got that on-bill there that suggests that it's on-bill financing. And they both involve, you know, a line item charge on the bill for cost recovery, but that's kind of like the extent of the similarity. And there's some really important distinctions to make with an inclusive utility investment approach, starting with the fact that it's a utility investment. And so we don't need to worry about the customer's credit or income qualification. We can dispense with that. It's tied to the location. The cost recovery and the tariff are tied to the location. So it's okay for customers to come and go. And if a customer leaves that location, there's not any debt that follows them out the door. So that makes it easier for us to serve renters. As Will said, it's really important that the savings exceed that cost recovery charge. And that's an important customer protection mechanism that prevents this from turning into a customer debt that's just called something else, right? Where we want to make sure that we are not in any way making their household living expenses go up. We want to actually bring them down. And as long as we're bringing them down, then we can, you know, we can honestly claim that this is not debt. This is a utility investment. So that's an important design feature that's not in a standard on-bill financing type loan. And finally, we're asking the customers to pay for the services and the benefits that they receive from these investments, which in this case are the bill savings. So if for some reason, you know, we made some upgrades and we installed some equipment, that equipment is not performing properly, or it fails and it's not repaired, we need to suspend those charges until we can either bring that equipment back into service, or if we can't do that, then we need to basically, write off the rest of the cost recovery and those payments end. So the customer's only paying for the benefits that they receive, and that's an important distinction here as well. Let me just check for questions here about how this works before we kind of talk about the state of play. Are there any questions about what I've said so far?
So, Bruce, you can choose which segment to answer the questions in.
Okay.
Carlene Cullen asked, does the IUI program include EV charging stations?
Well, that's a really good question. And probably now is as good a time as any to address that. So the utility is making an investment at a location, and the car charger is at the location. The benefits from the car charger are from the avoided gas costs, which are the car. And if the customer owns the car, whether they can take that with them. So there are some tricks about if we want to do EV charging. There are some ways to make it work. One way would be just the utility, especially if that charger can be controlled remotely, and as long as the customer says, hey, I've got a car and I want to use this car charger, then you can turn on the charger and you can add the monthly charge. And then if the customer, sells the car, or new customer moves in and they don't have a car, you can suspend the charge until someone has a car again. But there's some nuances there with the fact that the benefits, are tied to this asset that is not attached to the house. And so that's a complication that, so we probably won't try that on day one, but I have been doing some financial modeling to see if that might be, something that we add at a later date. Any other questions here?
Well, from Bernie Samet, he said that PG&E has offered IUI tariff on bill financing for years, but for commercial properties only. Why do you think that they haven't offered it to residential properties?
So what PG&E has offered to their non-residential customers is on-bill financing. So it's a loan, and it's a loan to the property owner, and it's debt. And it's not constrained by the savings, and it doesn't have any of the other savings protections, and there's no tariff that attaches to the meter. It's just a loan. And up to this point, the Public Utility Commission has actually prohibited the utilities from offering on-bill financing to residential customers, and the utilities have proposed it a couple of times, and the PUC has said no. So that's an important distinction to make between those two models.
And then Sebastian Kahn from MCE says, well, it's great that the IUIs are tied to a property and not to a specific customer, but a concern is that of community advocates is that landlords will make improvements, energy efficiency improvement to a property as a way to increase property value and then raise rents.
Right. Let's hold that question until we get to the customer protections conversation.
Okay.
And yeah, there's more to say about customer protections, and that's definitely a valid concern. Let's make sure we address it there.
Yeah, and Sebastian, you can dialogue directly with Bruce at that point. Okay. Move on.
All right, let's proceed here. So as previously noted, this is not an idea that we've just kind of made up here. This is an idea that's actually been deployed in a number of jurisdictions with success over the last close to 20 years, especially over the last 10 years. Most of the experience to date, especially with the more mature programs, has been with relatively small rural electric cooperatives in the southeastern United States, as you can see on the map. So Arkansas, Kentucky, North Carolina. And there's been very good success there. In the last couple of years, we're starting to see more interest from investor-owned utilities and kind of larger scale programs. So just this fall in North Carolina, Duke Energy announced that they're going to launch a program using this model. In Missouri, they're now, all three investor-owned utilities there are getting ready to deploy this model. There's a whole regulatory proceeding in Illinois to make this a statewide investment model. And then, of course, in California, we have an active regulatory proceeding underway. So a lot more kind of interest kind of starting to bubble up, and we're starting to see see some signs that we might finally start to see this deployed at a bigger scale. What's been interesting and intriguing about these early experiences, particularly with the rural co-ops, is they've been able to show a really big accelerate in their investments. And so, starting with the fact that they don't have to disqualify half of their customers, on day one. And then they're finding that they're getting about a 50% acceptance on their project offers, their investment offers, compared to 10% with their normal loan programs. And then they're able to do more comprehensive projects. And so, you multiply that up 2 times 5 times 2, you get like a 20-fold increase in investment deployment, which is pretty noteworthy. It is not a given that we can replicate this in California. Some circumstances may transfer, others may not. And so that's part of the due diligence we're undertaking now. But like I say, these early results certainly do, catch our attention and suggest the potential here if we can make this work. So where we're at in California, like I said, several years ago, we actually, a few of us wrote a white paper that was well received among policymakers and regulators. Going back to 2020, the Public Utility Commission recognized that we need some more innovative financing solutions, and in particular, they want to address the equity issues, and they want to address the scale issues and the ability to bring in private capital to leverage private capital to drive investments. And so they opened up this proceeding. In late 2021, they asked the investor-owned utilities to submit proposals for innovative financing solutions. And they also invited anyone else who wanted to submit a proposal could do so. So we took that opportunity, we being the team here charged with on Tech Clean California program. We took that opportunity to partner with Silicon Valley Clean Energy on a proposal which we submitted to the commission a year ago last summer, June of 2022. And of course, the PUC also got proposed from PG&E, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, SoCal Gas, California Advanced Energy and Alternative Transportation Finance Authority, and the Local Government Sustainable Energy Coalition. So I'm not going to focus on those last two too much. So we waited more than a year for the commission to finally rule on the proposals that they received, and we finally got a decision in August. And the decision is a step forward, but it's not yet kind of the last word. Basically what the commission said is they like the tariff on bill approach. They want to see all of the investor-owned utilities do that. And to the extent that the utilities were proposing other things, it's like, no, don't do that. Do the TOB thing instead. And the PUC is using tariff on bill as their nomenclature. And they specifically said they wanted the IOUs to get together and put together a joint proposal. And they want the IOUs to start with the Silicon Valley Clean Energy proposal as the starting point. They acknowledge that proposal that I can't quote it directly, but like the most well thought out, the most complete. And so they wanted to see that as the starting point. And so SVC is at the table with this working group, and we are there as well as SVC's partners. So, every Friday morning, I and my utility colleagues, we're meeting to talk about how to put this proposal together. And this is ongoing. Our proposal is due in May of next year. What happens after that is very cloudy in my crystal ball. It will take the commission some amount of time to rule on the revised proposal. And of course, they could rule in any number of ways. And then if we get a favorable ruling, there will be some amount of time for the utilities to stand up a proposal. And it's unclear whether we will continue with a separate program that is, sponsored by SBCE. I expect we will, but again, we don't know that until we get through this planning process. So I can't really predict what will happen after May of 2024. One other thing I will note about this process, the commission did direct everyone to form an equity committee, and this is open to anyone who wants to participate. Anyone raise their hand, and this is our opportunity to kind of go out to the community with kind of our draft ideas and to kind of vet them and test them and get feedback before we finalize our proposal. So that committee is starting, I think on Friday or tomorrow. Tomorrow is its kickoff meeting, 16th. So that's an important process note as well. Let's see, I think that's all I had to say about the regulatory process. Let's check for questions around this.
Yeah, so Bruce, I don't see questions in chat that are specific to this particular segment of your presentation.
Okay. So, well, let's keep going then. Since the SVC proposal is the starting point, let's maybe look under the hood here and see kind of what's involved. First, the partner profile of Silicon Valley Clean Energy is a community choice aggregator. So they don't actually own the wires or distribution. That is like MCE. And what this means is that they're not, because they're a CCA, they're not able to do a tariff on bill program unilaterally, because customers can opt out of CCA service. The CCA is not able to adopt a tariff and assign it to a location and make that tariff stick when there's a change in customers, because customers can opt out for any reason. So it's for that reason that it's essential that in this case the distribution utilities, PG&E, they have a role to play here. But SVCE is kind of the champion of this, and then we're there to provide technical support and some financial support as well. This is kind of a thumbnail of what we proposed more than a year ago. And so, these numbers are stale at this point, but there's some kind of important themes here that I wanted to highlight. First, just kind of the scope of the program. So our goal is to, do upgrades to somewhere between 500 and 1,000 homes that include a combination of heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. And we'll see how many homes do both, but if they do one or the other, that's great. And then we want to do as much energy efficiency improvement along the way as we can justify. So that's kind of the general scope. Like I say, we don't need to do income credit verification and everything. This is a pilot. There's some important design issues that we think we have a good solution for, but we need to test them, and we do not intend to experiment on people who have no margin for error. So we don't want to start out serving low-income households. In fact, if we come in contact with a low-income household, we like to encourage them to take advantage of the direct install programs if they're eligible. In year two, once we've kind of shown that our solution works and that we can deliver on our promises, then we feel more comfortable expanding to broader demographics. And then that's also a time when we want to revisit multifamily and figure out how to address multifamily. So that's kind of our staged approach to going to market. If you look at the financials over here, let's talk about this a bit. So what you're seeing here is for 500 heat pumps and water heaters, kind of a total aggregate investment, $16 million. And what you'll see here is that the IUI contribution there, that second line item, only $5.6 million. And remember, the cost recovery needs to be less than the savings. And so that puts a throttle on how much we can recover, which also then means how much we're willing to invest, because in this model, we're not planning to invest anything that we don't think we can recover. And so that limits, and so you can see that that's less than the full investment cost, because we're dealing with electrification and the economics of that and high electric rates, and so we're dealing with kind of less than ideal kind of economics for home electrification. Now, there are lots of incentives out there, and in fact, this was put together before the Inflation Reduction Act incentives were fully known. So this number is actually going up. But you'll see, $5 million in utility incentives or government incentives plus an I&I investment. There's a gap. This $4.7 million is a gap. So we're not yet to the point where we can offer a no out-of-pocket investment. And for a customer to move forward, they would need to contribute some of their own funding to make the project go. And we're still trying to close this gap. And I'll show you some other numbers where we're making progress. And just to maybe unpack this a little bit more, we estimated that this scope of investment over all the customers would save them about $7 million, and we're taking 80% of that is the IUI contribution. So we have a 20% buffer there, and that's savings that stays with the customer, and it's also some margin for error if our predictions are not perfect. So there's a 20% buffer between the 7 million and the 5 million, and so the customer, is netting 1.6 million. The customers 1.6 million in savings, right? That's the 7.2 minus the 5.6. All right, so you can see those numbers. All right, so that's basically kind of how the math works on the investment. Here's kind of what it looks like from the customer's perspective. There's kind of an important customer protection that's kind of embedded here. We got lots of feedback during the design process that, particularly from our low-income advocates, just kind of relating to us kind of the negative experiences that low-income customers had with PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, and the multiple stories of contractors coming in and selling projects to customers that they did not need and could not afford at prices that exceeded kind of the market, typical market prices, and they were doing this based on kind of factually inaccurate claims about the fact that the government's paying for this and it's not going to anyway. Lots of misleading claims. And so what we've seen here is basically like a conflict of interest between kind of the installer and the customer at that point of sale. And so the solution we've adopted, and it's a solution that's been adopted by other inclusive utility investment programs, is to assign that responsibility for connecting with the customer, making their scope of work, and making them an offer. We're assigning that to one of our program agents. So it's no longer the installer. And the installer just comes in and does the work based on the specs that we give them. So trying to resolve this conflict of interest issue here. Here's the technologies that we're looking at. I talked about the heat pumps and the energy efficiency. We think this can be extended pretty readily to rooftop solar and storage. We have some work to do to figure out how to take advantage of tax credits, which is kind of adds a wrinkle. As you can see, there's potential for car charging there. There's some wrinkles about doing that. And this is an important slide about which customers we can serve. So what you see here is that not all households are alike, and different customers have different opportunities to save on their bills through electrification and energy efficiency. And we did this big analysis of SVC customers, and we get this whole distribution of savings opportunities. We want to focus on the customers over here on the right side of this tail. They're the ones with the high savings opportunity. And we have kind of our working threshold is about $500 a year. If you can save more than $500 a year, then we consider you a candidate. That right now looks like it's maybe 20 or 30% of SVC's customer base. And if you kind of unpack that a little bit more and kind of see which customers we're talking about, is customers with high summer cooling bills and high winter heating bills. Kind of makes sense. So in practice, we're probably going to be focusing a lot of attention on kind of the hotter parts of Santa Clara County, Gilroy, Morgan Hill, those areas where there's probably more air conditioning and more cooling load. So this is an important thing for us to really think about, is how do we find the customers that have the savings opportunity? How do we focus on them? Because there's no point in spending time evaluating a home if the customer can't save anything because we can't invest in anything. Here's what it might look like with, looking at it kind of at the project level now instead of the program level. So what you see here is kind of our best estimate for a project that has a heat pump and energy efficiency improvements. And our estimate is that the total project cost will be $21,000. We can identify about $15,000 in incentives now that we can look at IRA as well. So now we've got a net project cost of $6,000. Okay, that's pretty good. We can recover costs over a 10-year period. So 10 times 6, and then there's annual bill savings for this project about $829. And so over a 10-year period, that's $8,290 of bill savings. And if you take 80% of that, you get to this $6,600 number. Okay, so that now sets kind of a cap on what we think we can recover for this project. Now, in this model, there's a cost of capital that's about 5%. And so you see that there's a difference here between the contribution to principal versus the total. So this difference here, $1,600, that's basically to cover the cost of capital. And the other $5,000 is actually contribution towards the project cost, towards the principal. So what you can see now is we still have a gap. We've got $6,000 in net project costs here. That's line 12. And we've got $5,000 contribution to principal from IUI, line 17. And that leaves a gap of about $1,000 in line 27. So we still have more pencil sharpening to do if we want to help that customer get to zero out of pocket. So that's kind of the math process. A couple other numbers just in terms of what their monthly charge would be over 10 years, their annual savings. And then you can see that over the 10-year period here that this electrification project would reduce GHG emissions by about 15 times. Let's see here. So I think this is my last slide in this section, and I want to talk a little bit about multifamily, and there are, of course, lots of multifamily housing. Just designing this for single family is non-trivial, and there's a lot to work out there, and we need to kind of test our solutions there. When you get to multifamily, there's some new twists that add even more complexity. So starting with the fact that you've got a diversity of ownership structures. You got nonprofit affordable housing that's deed restricted. You've got market rate. You've got real estate investment trusts. You've got condos with homeowner associations. You've got kind of these ownership structures. You've got different metering configurations. So in some cases, all the end uses are individually metered with appliances in every home. In other cases, it's master metered, and then you have like these central systems with boilers and chillers, and you have the issue of getting tenant consent if you want to do like a big multifamily building. You want to do the whole building. So there's lots of new things here that we don't need to contend with on the single family side. And so this is basically the rationale for us kind of making this kind of a version 2 priority to figure out how to address some of these additional issues. But it is on our roadmap, and we remain convinced that that this model can apply to multifamily as well as single family. And let's pause there and check for questions before we dig into this customer protection topic.
Yeah, so we have a question that I guess if you could go over again really quickly is how are the annual bill savings computed?
The annual bill savings, let's see here. Is the question about like once the improvements are done and we're going forward, or kind of how we're predicting them at the front end?
That's a good question.
Both.
So, Barry, do you have an answer to that?
I could address both if you want.
Okay, why don't you do that?
Okay. Well, on the back end, there is kind of our starting point is a solution developed by a company called Recurve Analytics. It's called Open EE Meter, and it's basically a meter-based analysis platform that looks at energy usage before the upgrade and energy usage after the upgrade and normalizes for weather and calculates the difference. And this is a mechanism that is actually been deployed in a number of energy efficiency programs in California around the state, these kind of meter-based and savings. So that's our starting point. We're doing a bunch of research now. I think we might need to make some modifications to the methodology, but the point being, it will be a meter-based calculation for determining kind of what the savings are. On the front end, we need to predict what the savings will be, so that we can figure out kind of how much we can recover, how much of our investment we can recover without putting the customer underwater. So kind of the initial step is, before we even knock on the door, we're looking at all these customers in the utility portfolio, and we have access to all their metered usage, so we can look at kind of their current patterns, and we can see which customers have really high winter gas usage and which customers have really high summer electric usage. And so we can kind of see which customers are likely to kind of meet our kind of high savings opportunity threshold. So that's something that is because the tech team has access to this data. And this is not something that everyone has access to, but we do. So that's cool. Once we've identified kind of our short list of prospects, then you have to go knock on the door. You have to actually go and inspect the home, and you have to figure out kind of what the actual scope of work would be. And for that, then we expect that we'll actually develop, like an engineering model of the kind of the future savings that will calibrate to their bills and then control for, customer behavior. And that will then be our kind of best and final prediction. And we'll make the first calculation of that monthly charge based on that predicted savings. And then, once we make the installation, we want to monitor that project for at least a year. At the end of the year, we want to see if we got the savings that we predicted. And if we don't, then we need to go back and take corrective action. We need to go back, either we need to figure out why the equipment is not performing the way it was designed, or if it's not working at all, or we need to add more savings measures, or we need to reduce their charges so that they're not paying more than their savings. So that's one of our customer protection guarantees. Did that answer the question?
Pretty good. It sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. Any other questions on this topic before we?
So, Will, you have a couple of questions. Can you ask them yourself? Okay. Let me go ahead and ask on behalf of Will. Does the model contemplate any contribution from the property owner in a multi-family building, multi-family unit setting?
Well, maybe if I can answer a slightly different question, which is a rental setting, rental housing, which could be single family or multifamily. And in that situation, our intention is to require the property owner, yes, to pay a cost share. And our rationale is that the property owner, even if they're not getting bill savings, they're getting brand new equipment, and they're getting like old equipment replaced that they otherwise would have to pay for themselves. So they're getting new shiny equipment, and so we want them to pay a cost share for that. So it's a way of kind of assigning costs and benefits, hopefully fairly, between the tenants and the landlord. And that's something that we would do for both single family and multifamily rental housing.
Yeah, and so I guess the follow-up question to that, Bruce, is how does that then play into the earlier question about landlords who would use these improvements to institute rental increases?
Well, there's been lots of recommendations that, the landlord basically needs to sign an agreement, basically sign a deed restriction at the beginning that says, I will not raise rent, more than say 3% a year, and I will not evict tenants for any reason other than this very narrow list of reasons. And it's a deed restriction; it's enforceable. There are so those are proposals that are on the table. And definitely ones that, in this TOB working group, I can pretty much guarantee that we're going to consider. Two questions that we need to address, at least two. One is, if we required that, could we enforce it? And again, or who would enforce it? Maybe that's another way of putting it. So local government, they can do rent control, and they have control over the landlord's business license, and they have all kinds of powers to enforce regulations. Utility doesn't have those powers, and a CCA doesn't have those powers, and the consultants doing implementation doesn't have those powers. And so there is the question, how would we enforce something like that? And then the other question is, okay, if we adopted those requirements and then went out to the marketplace, would any landlord say yes? Because this is still, at the end of the day, it's still a voluntary opt-in program, and we cannot make any improvements in the landlord's property without the landlord's consent. And so if these requirements become a poison pill and no landlord would say yes, then the net result is that we only serve owner-occupied homes, which may not actually be our optimum outcome. So I guess the short answer is I don't know, but those are the some of the related questions that we need to grapple with when we're figuring out an optimum design.
Thank you.
And then Sue Saunders has actually a question that neatly complements this discussion. In California, wouldn't the new rent control law address this concern?
Yeah, so this is an example where in my view, if anyone asks me, in my view, this is a problem that is best addressed system-wide across all rental housing. So it's no longer some onerous requirement that is only tied to these clean energy investments, right? So you decouple it from that, and all landlords have to protect their tenants and not raise rent more than is reasonable, and not evict them for unreasonable or without cause. And if you have those protections across the board, then we can just go and do our business, and we'll still charge a cost share because we still have that dynamic going on. But it really simplifies our interaction with the landlord, and it gets us out of the business of having to bribe the landlord into doing what they should be doing anyway. So that would be my preferred solution, and I can give you other policy examples where people try to attach conditions on public funding for energy efficiency and clean energy that I think would be better off just as a system-wide thing, but that's a separate conversation.
Yeah. And then again, along these lines, Bernie Salmon says, it seems that MC's LIFT program demonstrated success in multifamily units with heat pump installations, that landlords agreed to pay some of the install costs. So
right, I'm cautiously optimistic we can get landlords to say yes to that. The bigger question is whether they will accept a deed restriction that constrains their ability to, either evict or raise rents.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, let's explore this customer protection question in a little bit more depth. So, a first thing for us to contemplate is, okay, which customer risks should be in scope and which should be out of scope. So, what should we as the program sponsors take responsibility for, and what is not not our business. Things that we think are out of scope. Obviously, customers have, all kinds of things going on in their lives that might impact their ability to pay their bills, their household finances, both on the income side, their expense side. This is, a risk that households face today, and our investments don't change that. And so we think that should be outside the scope of this program. And the utilities have other ways of dealing with this. They have, rearage management plans and other ways of helping customers when, they find themselves unable to pay their monthly utility bills. But, our view is that doesn't need to be something that is intrinsic to this program design. Same thing on, variations in energy use patterns. And, after controlling for weather, there's all kinds of reasons why, household energy use might be high, 1 year and lower the next year, or high in one season, lower the next season. And we don't want to, get into the business of micromanaging kind of how customers use energy. We want to focus on delivering the savings that we promised. And so our focus on savings rather than their entire bill. Things like inflation, can't do anything about that. Rate changes is, and there's a question mark there because, on the one hand, yeah, we don't control rates. That's a whole other regulatory process, whole other decision-making process. On the other hand, the energy rates are a really important input into the savings calculation. We've looked at forecasts of gas rates versus electric rates. With the forecast from in the utility filings, in Energy Commission research, at the federal level, Energy Information Administration, and the consensus seems to be that, or at least it was a year ago, that gas rates would go up faster than electric rates. And if that forecast holds true, then our financial calculations will be robust and customers will save money. And where we run into problems is if electric rates go up faster than gas rates. And then the question is, well, what do we do about that? And that's the question mark there. And I don't have a good answer for that. But that is a concern. And then this question about tenant rent increases, evictions, and kind of who is the proper authority to enforce any requirements around that, and how far can we go and get landlords to voluntarily accept those kinds of restrictions. Those are questions that are, I say, active design questions that are still being grappled with. So protections against unethical sales practices. I talked about this a bit when I showed kind of the customer view and kind of our focus on shielding customers from unscrupulous sales tactics. Performance risks. Actually, I talked about this a bit when I talked about how to calculate the savings. And the important thing here is, well, a couple of things. At the front end, we make our best effort to predict what the future savings will be, and then we build in this 20% buffer between our savings prediction and the service charge that we're willing to assign. And then on the back end, we've got this ongoing measurement and verification for at least a year to make sure that the systems are delivering the benefits that we promised. And if they don't, then we need to take corrective action. So that's kind of in a nutshell our protection around that. On the tenant side, we've talked about landlords paying a cost share. I think that's an important provision, and then more protections that are under consideration. And then the last topic I'll touch on is thinking about the successor customers. And we've got the current customer, and we can show that they're going to save energy based on our detailed modeling and et cetera. But what happens when there's a change in customer? Some new customer lives in that same home. Are they going to save? And this has been a recurring question. And this is people need an answer to this to feel comfortable with this idea that we're going to assign a tariff to a location and it's going to stay there for 10 years, even if customers come and go. And so this matrix kind of illustrates kind of where the risk is for the successor customers. And it's a 9x9 matrix with, current customers on the vertical axis, or on this axis, successful customers across the top. We're going to make our investment decisions based on what we find with the current customer. If the current customer's got low usage, that means they have low savings opportunities. So we're not going to invest anything there. So take that scenario off the table. Where there's a risk to successor customers, if we go into a current customer's home, they've got really high usage, which means that there's lots of savings opportunity. And so we make this big investment with a really high cost recovery. And then the successor customer comes in and their usage is more typical. And it's not as high as the previous customer. And now they're not saving as much, but they still got this really high charge. And now they're underwater. So this orange zone is where we want to be thoughtful about not putting successor customers at risk. And so our proposed solution here, if we find a customer that has got high usage, we want to understand why it's high. And if it's due to something physical about the home, it's got super leaky ducts. Well, we can seal those leaks, and those leaks will stay sealed even if there's a change in customer. Okay, fine, that's not a problem. But if it's because the customer, for whatever reason, is just using a lot of energy, even though the home itself is not kind of out of balance in terms of its efficiency, well, then we want to predict the savings based on a more typical usage pattern. And so we use typical usage as kind of our inputs here. And what that means then is that we're going to have a lower savings prediction, lower cost recovery, lower level of investment. And so the current customer might actually get a bit of a windfall because they're still using a lot. But it means that the successor customers will always come out in a financially favorable position. Either they're saving as much or more as we predicted, or their bills are much lower than we expected. And so one way or the other, they're going to come out in a financially favorable place. And so we feel like by benchmarking our savings predictions to typical usage, we can kind of mitigate any risk to successor customers. And so we feel comfortable assigning that tariff to that location for the life of those improvements. So that's what that is. And let's take more questions about this topic or anything else that you want to talk about.
Okay. I'm wondering, Bruce, these are very early days for this program. You're still designing it. But do you have a sense of the percentage of low, moderate income folks that would be affected by this? Do you figure it would be 10%, 20%? Do you have a sense of what the range is?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what I know and what I don't know. When we looked at Silicon Valley's customer base and did an analysis across 270,000 customers, what we saw was, we thought that there's 20 to 30% of their customer base that were viable candidates. We don't know the income of those customers, so I can't say what fraction of low income customers, is it 20%, 30% low income customers? I don't know. But over the total customer base, it is about that. I expect that we will be able to serve a number of low income customers, because if we're going to Morgan Hill and Gilroy, there's a lot of agriculture and a lot of farm worker housing down there, and I would expect that they've got air conditioners, either a room air conditioner, if not central air conditioning. So I think that there's going to be some opportunities there. Other parts of the state, it could be very different, right? It's because on the heat pump side, at least, it's climate driven. And this thing, I also don't have visibility into like the savings opportunity on the water heater side yet. That's another unknown for me. But on the heat pump side, you go out to the Central Valley, go to Fresno, there's a good chance that like every customer in that area would be a good candidate, just because of very different savings opportunities. So it's on our roadmap to do that analysis for PG&E. We haven't done it yet, so I don't know what that answer will tell us. Where it's hardest is in, the cool climate, areas, along the coast. Half the households don't even have air conditioning. So, a heat pump will save on their winter heating bills, but it won't save anything on summer cooling. In fact, they might actually start using cooling that they didn't use before. There's probably still an opportunity on the water heating side, even if you don't do heat pumps. And there's still an opportunity on the energy efficiency side, and there's still an opportunity on the rooftop solar plus storage side. So, the measure mix might need to change depending on where you're at. So those are some of the variables here that I think will be the final driver. One other thing that I will add that is also kind of an outstanding research question. Early on, when we did this, I looked at combining heat pumps with solar and storage, and the economics were really favorable. And the solar and storage would basically help pay for the heat pump. Great. Since then, the PUC has changed the rules for how the value of the solar generation is calculated. It's much less favorable now, and I have not gone back and redone that analysis yet to figure out if it still makes sense to try to combine those. But that's another scenario that is worth investigating, whether rooftop solar plus storage plus other stuff might provide more project savings that would allow us to serve more customers than we would otherwise. So that's an open research question.
Okay, great. Sebastian Kahn, MC Sebastian Kahn has a couple of questions. Sebastian, do you want to ask them directly?
Sure. Yeah, Bruce, I'm thinking, maybe for the high usage customers, to your point about better understanding why their usage is high in the first place, is there any component of the proposed pilot that would require some type of site assessment for y'all to go out and say, hey, here are the educational components that you could consider implementing to lower your usage in the first place? Like, I'm just thinking that so many folks don't know about 4 to 9 peak windows or time of use rates, and it seems like there might be like some pre-education that could take place.
Yeah. We're contemplating maybe even going further than that. Our ideals, because that by itself is like, I'm not willing to bank on that, and I'm not willing to like count that savings in my financial model and like invest based on that. But what I would be willing to do is, if we can show that, okay, number one, we'll switch this customer to a more electrification friendly rate. And to me, that means high peak charges and low off peak charges. And then show that, we can maybe do some active load management or build in some active scheduling so that the customers getting their energy services fully met without, incurring those peak charges. And we can kind of make this a set it and forget it kind of solution. So the customer doesn't have to remember every day to like not use electricity at 4:30. If we can make it a set it and forget it thing that is, and maybe even we actively manage it on their behalf, that's bankable. Now I can count that savings in my model. I can invest against that. I can bring capital to that. So that's, again, one of the things that is on the table for exploration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Bell Cole has a couple of questions. I guess one goes to a question of the stability of the incentives. You're clearly assuming that the incentives will be there. I see you nodding your head as if, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. Heartburn right here.
And then secondly, how likely is it that the CPUC will respond to your proposal due in May 2024? I mean, are there questions that they raised that would suggest that they would delay?
You're inviting me to speculate. I guess the questions that they have posed to us, in my mind, are all straightforward. And I would even argue that we've already answered them in our original proposal. So, so then the question is, okay, what do we need to show the PUC to get them to yes? It's not, I mean, there's obviously a lot happening behind the scenes, and we weren't able to have like kind of a face-to-face dialogue with them about their thought process. So I can't tell you kind of what calculus they made to kind of send us back to the drawing board. The good news is we have CPUC staff in these working group meetings, on a weekly basis, and they're not there to direct or participate in the decision making. They're there to listen. But it means that it gives me confidence at the end of this process, we will have people within the Public Utility Commission that are kind of fully educated on not only the final result, but how we got to the final result and kind of all the thought that went into it. And so that gives me some confidence that the final decision will be an informed decision. And so, if it also then, I think, also opens up a line of communication, if there's something important that the commission needs to see resolved, their staff can tell us now, and make sure that we've checked that off before we, turn in our homework. So I guess all of that gives me cautious optimism that the proposal we submit, next spring will be well received. I mean, of course, the variable in this, of course, is like what happens with the other interveners. We have this equity committee. Hopefully we'll get good engagement there, but it would help if kind of there was broad consensus among the broad kind of the larger community that, yeah, this solution is innovative and practical and it will work and it's, kind of fully baked. And if we have, interveners that are, trying to shoot it down and disparage it, that complicates things. So those are kind of the variables, I'd say, but at this point, I'll just say I'm cautiously optimistic, and to the point that I'm willing to put my time and effort into trying to make this work.
Great. So I'm mindful of the time. It's 11:10 now. We do have a couple of questions, including from Sebastian Kahn. Are you okay time-wise for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I have a hard stop at noon.
Okay. Sebastian, do you want to ask your question?
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, Bruce, I'm a little unclear on what the roles and responsibilities are between SVCE and, in this case, PG&E. Can you describe that in a little bit more detail and how SVCE is engaging? I understand that they're kind of, spearheading the working group with your organization, but when it comes to actual implementation of the program, assuming the proposal is approved, what does SVCE's engagement look like?
Yeah, and I have a slide on that I apparently did not put in this deck. So SVCE's role, basically, we would be working hand in glove with them to kind of administer the program on an operational basis. And so, of course, SVCE has, strong customer relationships, and so we would be working with them to engage their customers using their brand. We were going to hire what we call a program operator who will do a lot of the work on the ground, and then SVCE would initiate these projects and then tell PG&E, hey, we got this project and it's this scope and we need this. The investment is this much, and kind of coordinate with PG&E. And PG&E would basically be like kind of a silent investor in this scenario where, they're providing capital and, signing the tariff and, doing the cost recovery, but everything else outside of that would be SVCE and the implementation team.
Okay. And then, so another question and then a comment. How did the IOU proposals differ from SVCE's proposal?
Well, let's start with SoCal Edison. So they actually proposed a design very similar to the SVCE design, and that is because we were talking to them a lot and sharing kind of our draft ideas, and they embraced a lot of those ideas. They have some limitations because they're an electric only utility and they themselves cannot see the customer's gas usage. And So that that kind of limits their ability to do some risk management and even to figure out kind of some of the economics for the customer. So they had to do some. So they kind of hedged a little bit on kind of what they're able to do and what they're able to promise, but it was basically the same concept, very well aligned. PG&E kind of took kind of a different approach altogether, and they proposed kind of more of an enabling platform that would kind of bring capital into a portfolio of programs, and different programs could have different designs, but they would all be funded through kind of this pipeline of capital that PG&E would administer. And inclusive utility investments could be kind of one solution in this portfolio of programs. And the Public Utility Commission has shot that down. It's like, no, that's not what we want. We want, tell us what the program is. Don't tell us that you'll bring a program later. Like, tell us now what the program is. And then you had the San Diego Gas and Electric. They didn't propose anything for residential. They only proposed a non-residential program. And I should clarify this proceeding. They asked for both residential and non-residential proposals, but SDG&E did not give them a residential proposal. And then SoCal Gas proposed basically to do residential on-bill financing with zero customer protections, and that didn't go over very well either. So, and I think one of the reasons, one reason the commission may have chosen the path that they did is, they were preoccupied with kind of what to direct the IOUs to do. And it wasn't enough to approve, a little kind of boutique pilot here in Santa Clara County and without, a solution for the rest of the state. And so they're more focused on that. And that's why they sent us all back to the drawing board. And so one hypothesis that we kind of got caught in the crossfire here and we couldn't move forward because the other utilities couldn't move forward. Or maybe there's something they didn't like about our proposal and they just didn't tell us, but who knows?
Okay. So Sue Saunders has a comment in chat that I think echoes the sentiments of everybody here, which is this has such potential to expand electrification to everyone. I really appreciate your work. And,
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think that's, thank you for the work that you're doing, the work that SBCE is doing. And do you have any final comments?
I'm excited about the potential and the devil's in the details.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been terrific. A real clinic.
All right.
Inclusive utility investment.
All right. Thank you all.
All right.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye. Okay. So let's move on quickly to organization reports. And is there any other issue that anybody wants to raise before we get to organization reports? And not seeing anybody. Let's see. So, Belle, do you want to talk about ecologically sound practices?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I did want to say one thing before I do this is everybody should have a look at the latest UN report. Came out Tuesday on greenhouse gas emissions worldwide, and it's terrible. Just a really, really dire report. We should all pay close attention to it because it affects what's going to happen at all levels. But anyway, I just wanted to say that ESP, Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership, has a meeting. We had one yesterday focusing on a Sonoma Ecology Center effort on a handbook that they are putting out. It's going to be digital, fantastic on all aspects of ecologically sound approaches to land management. And I'll send something out summarizing that. It's really worth paying attention to. The other thing is that we're having a meeting on the 12th of December. And the meeting on the 12th of December is about an evacuation risk assessment put out by NWPA with a really marvelous scientist named Charlotte Jordan and her counterpart in Sonoma. And it will it's from 2 to 4. And then there's a November 28th. There's a field trip to greater Ross Valley, a greater Ross Valley spot, and we'll get that out to you too. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, so Ken, you I don't know if your cough will permit you to state this. But what Ken Strong just dropped in the chat was that the 2023 National Climate Assessment was issued by the Biden administration on Monday. And yeah, so that's available. For Marine Conservation League, I just dropped into chat a link, very long link, to MCL's proposal for a countywide plan to decarbonize buildings. That's the plan that we sent to the county. And then I have a couple of other things for Marine Conservation League. One is that we're seeking nominations for MCL's 2024 Environmental Achievement Awards. You can get a nomination package by calling or emailing the office. And it's awards for youth leadership, environmental achievement, green business lifetime awards, and the deadline for getting the packet and filling it out is November 20th. And I said earlier that other MCL committees deal with climate adaptation as one example. The Wednesday, December 6th, it's at 10 a.m., Land Use, Transportation, and Water Committee will feature a speaker on sea level rise, adaptation planning at China Camp, and another speaker on flood insurance, which clearly has been affected by climate change. So that's what I have to say about Marine Conservation League. Any other folks want to make a report?
So,
If not, then I think we're done here. Thank you very much, folks.